Hi, my name is Tommy Song, and I'm a sophomore in Columbia College. I was in the Spring 2017 seminar of Columbia University and Slavery. My project focused on William Archibald Dunning, a longtime professor of history and political theory at Columbia College and the Columbia School of Political Science, which is now the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. Dunning inspired the Dunning School, a very racist school of thought that included Reconstruction historians who were influential throughout the 20th century. My project's goal was to evaluate the influence of Dunning and determine the role that Columbia had in the development of this influential historian. I am interested in the intersection of academia and media, and I wanted to figure out how influential this one man was to such a powerful group of historians who changed the narrative of American Reconstruction until historians like Professor Foner rewrote the history of Reconstruction in the late 20th century. Dunning was born in 1857 during the antebellum period, and throughout his early years he experienced and witnessed national events from the Civil War and other major political happenings, and eventually that led him to delve into the field of history and political science. There were two institutions in Dunning's life that led him to become such a monumental historian, and the first institution was Dartmouth, not Columbia. Dunning began his freshman year at Dartmouth in 1877. In 1878, Dunning participated in a mob attack of two brothers, and after the attack, he was kicked out of the institution and sent back home to New Jersey. This became perhaps the biggest trauma for Dunning's personal life, and eventually this trauma was overcome in 1916 when he received the doctoral letters from Dartmouth, and this was a result of the career he had as a scholar and a historian. My project revolves around how he overcame that trauma and how that trauma led him to the doors of Columbia. And of course, Columbia was the reason why Dunning was able to move on from the Dartmouth trauma, and Columbia was the institution that allowed Dunning to become such a seminal figure in American historiography. The fact that Dunning was a professor at Columbia, especially someone who was agreeable and well-liked by not only students but colleagues, school administrators, and even politicians and other scholars in other fields. I thought that far-reaching influence was notable, especially because I'm a student at Columbia and I wanted to learn more about how another person who is part of the same community I'm part of was able to do so much damage through his scholarship, especially because Dunning and the Dunning School, after disappearing from the American academia, still existed in the form of public opinion as well as American mass media. For example, The Birth of the Nation, or other racist films and literature that furthered the narrative of false Reconstruction history. The most interesting finding from my research was definitely Dunning's handwritten notebook from his lecture in Constitutional History in Europe. This was around 300 pages of just handwritten notes from this one lecture that he took, and it's at the law school. The notes were filled with Dunning's personal thoughts as well as popular narratives of constitutional history. Dunning eventually developed a lot of his own ideas from his classes at Columbia, and his professor, John Burgess. And the notes were very illuminating of how this graduate student eventually became the most influential historian of that era. I think Reconstruction history is arguably the most important part of American history, considering all the uncertainty and hostility surrounding the nation's past right now. And Dunning was perhaps the most influential figure in 20th century historiography of the American Reconstruction. His graduate students and his colleagues and historians from other parts of the nation and other nations, like James Bryce in England, they helped create a narrative that is essentially false and extremely white supremacist. The most important part about this whole project is that there's room for everybody to learn about your own community or institution's past. It's important to enrich institutional memory in the sense that without records, without studying the history of a group that you're part of, I just don't think it's possible to be a responsible, functional member of that community. Learning about the past, especially the past of the institutions you're part of, is crucial in becoming a better member of that group in society.